All right, welcome, guys. We are into our episode 2 after the episode reactions for the Core 4 with me, the Grease Goblins, Ricky, voice of Old Town, Becky does blog, and JC, the advocate. We're going to be giving our thoughts after the episode. There will be spoilers, so make sure you've already watched the episode, all that kind of stuff. Come back later. And let's just jump right in. Let's talk about our first opening, just general thoughts, what we thought about the episode. I'll start with you, Ricky, since I think you went last week. So what did you think about episode 2?
I'd say it was massive for the franchise. It was a gigantic, huge, gigantium moment for the fandom. No, just kidding. I really, really liked the episode. I think I mentioned in my review that this was the episode that really got me into it, and I love Baylor. The actor who plays Baylor is perfect. New Kingsguard armor, so pretty spot on Kingsguard armor, by the way. And I really like the slower paced scenes with Steely Pate and Tenzo. So yeah, great episode. I think this one was really, really good.
That's a lot of good praise from Ricky. He's a critical man, as we know. Moving on, Becky, what did you think of episode 2?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was overall a good episode. Saw a lot more of certain characters than I ever expected to see, but I'm not complaining. We got introduced to new characters as well, which was good. Overall, yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was better than episode 1, and I really liked episode 1. So I thought it was good. We're on the up. We're on the up from here, I think.
A lot of positive thoughts, and that's what we love to see. JC, what were your thoughts on episode 2? And yeah.
I thought it was okay. I
Hit us with it, JC.
So I mean, the opening was quite a choice, I'll say that, but that wasn't what necessarily kind of brought it down for. I mean, I liked the episode, but I do feel like we had a good 15-minute episode stretched out to 30 minutes. And I think this is my overall problem with the United of the Seven Kingdoms. I mean, granted, I've only seen 2 episodes. I haven't watched all 6 like Ricky has, but so far what I'm definitely seeing is that we're really stretching out some stuff and adding some filler segments, which is fine. But I don't, at least for me anyway, personally, I don't see what the filler is adding to the show. I feel like this could have been a more concise 4-episode series and would be better, but again, I've only watched 2 episodes, so that could change.
I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, so I won't talk about it a little bit. Right now, I'll talk a little bit on it, JC, but I do think like the idea of, I'm really thinking this should have been a movie, but I do think just to be more positive, because I'm a little bit more positive with this episode than I was the last episode. I did like this episode a good amount more, and I don't know if that's just from enjoyment. I think that more of the comedy landed for me in this episode. I thought it was just generally more fun. It also probably helps it was a little shorter, so maybe the comedy didn't get to us by the time you got to the end of it, which I do think it's interesting that I liked this episode more than the first episode, when the first episode covered more book material than the second episode did. It was a lot more added scenes or extending dialogue or just giving us extra stuff there. I did like a lot of the introductions of characters. Like Ricky said, I liked the introduction of Baylor. I thought that was pretty spot on. I liked the introduction of Arian. I liked a lot of the introductions to some of our new cast. I also do like the way that they kind of not backtracked in terms of like a negative way, but in terms of like, one of the questions I had from episode 1 was the Lionel stuff and how that kind of maybe goes against the themes for the Dunk and Egg novellas, specifically the first one. I did like that this episode kind of reestablishes, okay, well, Dunk is still not being able to get into this tourney because these lords are not remembering Arlen, and Lionel doesn't even like almost recognize like Dunk. He's just like Hedge Knight, doesn't even remember his name or anything like that. It kind of goes, okay, these guys aren't best buds. It's just kind of Lionel knows who he is type of idea. So I did like that. On the flip side, I wasn't a fan of the entire intro, like flashback stuff. We're going to talk about it probably throughout this stream. I've still, from episode 1 to episode 2, I've not enjoyed the flashbacks much. And whereas I did like the comedy more in this episode, I did think there were still times where I was like, on the comedy at times. But that was our general thoughts for the episode. So I would say a lot of us are a little bit more positive, and JC, you're a little bit more. Okay, you know what? Let me ask you this, JC. Did you like this episode more or less than the last episode?
I'd have to rewatch it. I think I did like it more. I think it's just the added, I felt it a little bit in episode 1 where it's like, oh, we're stretching this out. And then I'm feeling it more here in episode 2, where even though the stuff that's happening here in episode 2 with the Targaryens being introduced and, the jousting starting, and obviously there's some scenes here with Tenzel Tutal, I thought that was still pretty interesting. So the bullet points are interesting. I think I'm just beginning to starting to get a little bit fatigued by like, oh, okay, like I'm really feeling the length here. It's like, like yourself, Grease, I think this could have been a movie as opposed to 6 episodes. But I mean, I don't want to, I still liked it. I still liked it. I just, again, I'm starting to feel the length a little bit.
I gotcha. I think that's a good transition. Like you mentioned, we're starting to see more of the Targaryens, some of the people that maybe the casual fan base might more enjoy. I want to ask you, Becky, given this is your favorite book, right, Becky?
Yeah, of all time.
How did you like the introduction of some of our new characters for the show? Baelor, Maekar, Aerion. There's more, but the main ones in the Targaryens.
Yes, I thought they did pretty well. Like Baelor, I think they've done incredibly well so far. Like the way he delivered his lines in this episode, his whole persona. Like I feel like he's taken from the book. Aerion, Bright Flame, he as well, I think, was depicted to be the horrible person that he is. And I think that he did that really well. I'm a little bit confused at the moment on Maekar. That's the only thing, because he's a lot older, and I'm sure. I mean, I don't know if I'm getting my like Targaryen history incorrect, but I'm sure Baelor's supposed to be older, right? Isn't he meant to be the oldest one? But it seems like Maekar's significantly older, right? I don't know.
So Maekar is supposed to be the youngest of the 4 children, and by the way the show depicts him, he seems to be a lot older. Like it's kind of the same situation as if you go back to Game of Thrones. Ned and Catelyn are a lot older than what they were in the book. It's kind of the same idea. It's kind of what they did, Becky.
Yeah, but it just feels like Maekar's really old. Like I'm not old shaming. I'm not being ageist. I'm just saying he's really old.
He's not Stannis, That's the parallel that we always drew, and I'm not getting that from the depiction in this show.
I agree. So I'm not 100% on him at the moment. I think he would just need to deliver more lines, and then I'll have more of an opinion on him. But the rest of them, I think, looked good. Obviously, we saw a small glimpse of Valar. So again, I can't really make a opinion of him yet. I didn't see the streak in his hair that I'm sure he's meant to have. But, if they're going to change that from the book, it's not a big deal. It's a little hair streak. But yeah, overall, I thought it was good. Like I thought the introduction of the characters was what I wanted to see from this episode, because we didn't see much of the Targaryens in episode 1 at all. So that's what I was hoping for from episode 2. But I kind of agree a little bit about it. Maybe should have been a movie, because I also don't think this episode progressed the plot much at all. It didn't really do. I mean, we saw a bit with the jousting. It was more of like focusing on Dunk's struggle and focusing on him as a character. But I'm fine with that. But I just don't know if casual fans will be, because they might want to see more action, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. And I'll talk about this as we'll have a little section, because JC made sure to remind me of my dad's review of episode 2. But I did want to then go to Ricky, because this is something you reminded me of, or not reminded me, but like kind of told me a little bit that, Maekar and the Stannis comparison maybe is not what we're going to see. So what are your thoughts in terms of, all the characters Becky talked about, but just, Maekar, all those characters, all those Targaryens, I guess.
I'm with Becky. I think Baelor is incredible, and he's incredible in every scene of this season. And Aerion is pretty good. Kind of stumbling through this because I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm still not. I've watched the season 3 times, but I'm still not sure what I think of Maekar. I don't think it's horrible, but I don't think it's great either. it's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah,
so
I
we're
agree.
not getting that.
Yeah.
That's off the table. But kind of set myself up for disappointment with
Yeah,
that.
I agree. I'll talk on Makar, after JC goes, but I'm kind of in the same vein where it's I don't think it's a bad performance or anything. I just don't think, based on the character that I think a lot of us expected, it's not fulfilled that. But yeah, JC, let me go to you. Thoughts on the Targaryens? Also, if you want to throw in, we also got to meet Steely Pate,
Yes.
the armorer. So, what do you think about all of the new characters, all the new people we ran into in the episode?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously it's exciting to finally get the Targaryens on screen. And I imagine the casual fan base that is watching this show, having not read the books, I imagine they were pretty excited to finally get to see the Targaryens here in action. So I thought all the characters were, I'm just going to echo what you guys have said. Like, I thought all the Targaryens did, right by their characters. Obviously, we haven't seen too much of Aerion Brightflame, but the few scenes we got here in this episode, it's like, oh, he's casted absolutely perfectly. I think he's probably the Targaryen I would say that most fits his character. Baelor Breakspear, I thought he's really cool. Again, we didn't get to see too much of him, but you could tell that he's got a streak of nobility there. So I'm excited to get to delve further into his character with each passing episode. And again, the big question mark here is Makar. He's fine, but when I read the book, the image that I got from him was that he was a stern man, but he meant well in his sternness. But here, at least based off of just this episode, he definitely comes across as more of a jerk. So, I'd be interested to see how that changes, or if that even changes as the series goes on. But I thought Steely Pate was fantastic. I was like, okay, yeah, this is like a hard ass, armor, but he's not, he's a hard ass, but he's not a jerk. It's like, he means well. It's like, oh, go ahead and I'll rent these out for 2 stags, this armor. But you can definitely, the performance fits the character. It was a really good performance, and I thought Steely Pate did really well.
Agreed. JC, I'm glad you were the first one to curse. So now that I've like the go to say something I wanted to say about Makar.
Do it.
So with Makar, this was my biggest problem of the episode for the most part. This is the thing I was like watching. I was like, I don't like this. But on one hand, I think if we didn't have the context of the book, and like for me personally, Makar is one of my favorite Targaryens, I wouldn't be like, oh, well, what's happening here? So I think in terms of like the performance by the actor, I think it works really well. But in terms of like the character they're adapting, I never got the vibe that he was kind of like this sassy guy that's just like, oh, he's just saying fuck off and just, rolling his eyes. And it's like, okay, well, now I definitely see where Aerion got it. Makar, just like, it doesn't come off that way like in the book, where it comes off as like Aerion's kind of like the bad apple. And, Makar's not like a perfect father or anything, but like, it doesn't seem like, oh, he inherited it all from his dad type stuff. I'm just not a fan of that, because the way he reads so much more is Stannis comparison that we talk about with, Ricky brought up. So in terms of the Makar thing, I think is going to be the most interesting to discuss throughout the community. I thought Baelor was, like you guys have said, it was really good. Aerion, really, I enjoy so far the performance, the look. I've talked about the look before. I'm not sold on the look for Aerion Brightflame, and he just looks very like basic, but it's besides the point.
And yet they're so proud of that wig. I don't think it's a wig even. I think they just dyed his hair very in a very complex way, because the actor who plays him, Finn Bennett, shared a photo today, and they were very proud of that. And I was like, yeah, just give him long hair would be better.
Yeah,
there's edits out there where he has long hair. It looks way cooler.
Well, my thing is not, it's not even just the long hair. It's just like, this guy's name is Aerion like Brightflame. He's kind of like Renly for the Baratheons. He's very colorful, and it's like he shows up and it's like, oh, he's got black chainmail on. He just looks like some regular Targaryen guy. There's nothing crazy about him. But again, we've only seen him a little bit, so I'm not going to criticize it too much. But in terms of the other performances, I thought were really well done. All that kind of stuff. So I feel like we all kind of hinted at this in our open. I want to go to Becky again to start out this. What were your thoughts? What are your thoughts just in general now that we have 2 episodes on the depiction of Sir Arlen?
So, How do I even process what we saw of Sir Arlen in that episode? So I was confused by the first 10 seconds. Oh, I've got the floor. Awesome.
You got the floor.
So, what was he called? What did we call him? Sir Arlen the Long? Is that so? Sir Duncan the Tall and Sir Arlen the Long, hung like a horse. So yeah, we saw a lot more than I expected to from him. In terms of his actual personality, he seems a little bit more feisty than I thought he was in the book. But I don't know if feisty is the word. Maybe it is. He's a bit more of a jokester, and yeah, Sir Alan Ironrod. I like that. But yeah, it's he was a bit. I felt like in the book he was a bit more like a mentor, and he was a bit more like a chill person. Whereas I feel like in the TV show so far, he is a bit more I mean, we saw from the flashbacks in episode 1 that he's punching Dunk. Alan of Longtree. I love that. That's perfect. That's brilliant.
Hacking tree.
That is perfect. But yeah, I just feel like he's different. He's just a bit more jerky and not as nice of a person, maybe. Not as moral of a person as I depicted him to be when I read the book. That might just have been my interpretation of Sir Arlen in the book. But yeah, it's hard for me to process my thoughts when all I'm thinking about is his schlong. So I'm going to have to come back to this later.
The distracting thing,
Yeah, there was a lot to look at.
Moving over to you, JC. What do you think about so far the depiction of Arlen throughout the first 2 episodes?
So my thoughts are mixed. So on the one hand, I think it is an interesting twist that, when you're reading A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, you're in Duncan the Tall's perspective. And obviously he's a little bit of an unreliable narrator. We didn't really cover this in the first episode, but there's a theory that he was never actually knighted by Sir Arlen. And it's he just kind of says that he was knighted. It might be a lie. But the other thing is that he's unreliable in his memory recollection of.
Sorry, JC. Oh, sorry. Hold on. We got to pause for this one.
No. Actually, guys, keep them coming. The most clever chatter who makes the most clever pun wins. I don't know. Wins the Grease Award or something. As well. So the unreliable narrator aspect with regards to how Duncan the Tall potentially remembers Arlen of Pennytree, it might be skewed. It's so there's room for interpretation where it's maybe Arlen wasn't the nicest guy, and just Dunk kind of keeps telling himself that oh yeah, Arlen was a great guy. And he tells the reader Arlen was a great guy, but maybe he really wasn't. So that's an interesting twist. However, on the other hand, all these flashbacks, especially these, I can't speak. And Ricky, I'm sure you cannot speak on what happens in episodes 3 through 6, but I'm hoping that. Well,
but I don't want to spoil you guys.
Okay, well, I'm hoping that there's going to be less flashbacks that are as not necessarily as disturbing. They're just unnecessary. It's we start this episode off with something completely irrelevant and unnecessary. It doesn't really tell us anything about Arlen's character. If we had started the episode with maybe Arlen whipping, a flashback of Arlen whipping Dunk, that would be one thing. But just Arlen just, Arlen the Iron
whipping his dick.
Whipping it out in support of Harambe here, then I'd be
I mean, you got that.
then it's
what are you
all right.
complaining about? I don't get it.
So, that's a theory, Baron. It's a popular theory amongst the fandom. It's not, officially confirmed, but it's
not officially confirmed to some. To others, like myself, he's not a knight. I'm sorry, but it's besides the point.
Exactly. Awesome sauce. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Ricky, since you have seen the whole show, I don't know how much you want to say here, but what are your thoughts on the depiction of Sir Arlen? I know me and you've talked about it a little bit.
I really don't like it. It doesn't get better than this, and I think they went way too far with him. I get the idea, right? You would want to portray it in contrast to what Dunk is saying, and then it's the exact opposite. He's not chivalrous. He's just some landed drunk it's not really a knight, Arlen. And it kind of, they wanted to portray that and then give Dunk the opportunity to shine, but I just think it's too far. This comedic approach is just, it can get funny. I imagine this is going to be a huge meme, and stuff, but I don't know. I wanted to have a mentor type, and fuck's sake.
Continue, Ricky. Continue.
Yeah, he broke 4 lenses with Baylor. No, I wanted a mentor type, and I guess that's still kind of a thing, but it's more what Dunk projects, right? The
Yeah.
dream idea of a knight, and then they show the contrast, and yeah, but it doesn't get better than this, and I mean, it's not as graphic, but it doesn't really get funnier. It's just more of the same from here on out. And if I would have to pick one thing that I don't like about the show, it's Sir Arlen.
That's a very bold statement, given you've watched the whole show. So,
that's interesting.
I'll say this just to respond to that comment. I have seen a lot of like the casual people that don't enjoy the show. A lot of them have referenced stuff like the poop jokes in the first episode. So I hope it doesn't either, because I do think it overshadows some of the great moments in the show. And especially as we get further into the show, when we have more of the bigger moments, we're still building up to everything in the first 2 episodes. Hopefully that isn't what everybody thinks about with this show. But yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with Ricky. I don't really like Sir Arlen's depiction, and I understand what they're going for, but I just feel like the flashbacks so far have just been used as, here, guys, laugh at it. I mean, it's just, especially the first episode, it was much more apparent in the first episode than it was in this episode. But like the first episode was, okay, let's just throw in while Dunk is giving a speech about Arlen, and he's literally over his dead body, and we're gonna have just random funnies in here randomly in the middle of it, and then later in the episode, randomly in the middle of conversation with Manfred Dondarian. So I haven't liked it, because it's kind of just portrayed Arlen as just kind of an asshole. That's just how I look at the character right now, and I get the idea of Dunk is seeing him through just, oh yeah, this guy took me in, and I'm overlooking some of his flaws and saying he's this great knight and all this kind of stuff. But it's one of those things where it's like, in the novella, it never really ever came off that way to me. And yeah, it is an unreliable narrator through Dunk's head, but I don't know. I'm kind of in the same boat as Ricky. I was kind of more expecting more like this honorable mentor that taught Dunk how to be as a knight and what chivalry is, and it kind of falls flat when you see some of the stuff they're flashing back to. But that's my thoughts on Sir Arlen. Anything else you guys want to say on Sir Arlen before we move to another subject?
Yeah, it's a little bit Family Guy. I mean, it's not as far as like Family Guy, where it's like, oh, gee, Lois, remember that time that Sir Arlen, the penny tree, totally whipped it out? But I mean, like, well, it has the flashback. Yeah. But yeah, I can definitely see, how that kind of stuff is jarring, and it, in a way, it sort of interrupts the flow of the episode as well. Like, Dunk is doing something, and then like it'll flash back to something, and humor is subjective, but I don't know. I don't know that many people who think an old man's wee is funny.
I don't know. We've gotten quite a lot of laughs out of this stream. We've gotten quite a lot. I will also throw this out there, Jason, before you continue. When I critiqued the humor, it's usually when it's conflicting with tones in the episode.
Yeah.
It's not things that I just found that were not funny. Like, there are things that in this episode that I didn't find all that funny, but it's like, I'm not going to bring them up because, maybe Becky found them funny, or Ricky found them funny, or whoever. Like you said, it's very subjective.
Yeah, I mean, if it adds to the character, if it says something about someone, then it's totally, like, I'm totally cool with it. And I mean, the opening scene was only like 10 seconds, so it's not that big of a deal. But the constant cuts throughout the episode that show, Arlen just being a giant jerk to Dunk, I think it gives us the perspective like Dunk the unreliable narrator, but at the same time, a lot of the humor that's used throughout, it's like it doesn't even make sense. It's like, all right, you're supposed to think, it's like, oh man, Arlen was kind of a jerk, but then why are we painting this as kind of like, it's like a comedic moment. It's like, oh, like Arlen really did mistreat it, but we're supposed to laugh at this mistreatment. It's tonally conflicting. So yeah.
We're gonna have a really, really, really interesting conversation in 3 weeks, because
Oh boy.
the intercutting stuff won't stop, and it's there's a scene, and I can talk pretty freely about this, where Arlen is dancing and singing around the bonfire like a madman, and
You're giving me Tom Bombadil vibes from Lord of the Rings right now. That's
it's
what I'm
like,
imagining when you're describing this.
and he's jumping around, and it drags on, and you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Interesting.
I'll be
Becky,
on the
anything
lookout
you
for
want to
that.
add on Arlen before we continue?
No, I feel like that's it really. I think obviously they're trying to take a different turn for like the wise old mentor trope. Like I think they're making it very clear that that is not what Sir Arlen of Pennytree was. He's not the wise old mentor. He's this jerky, humorous guy. But and like we say, Dunk being an unreliable narrator because he idolizes Sir Arlen. The way he's talked about him is so highly, and then there's a flashback that's not very great for Sarah Arlen. So it's like Duncan's disregarding those awful things that Sarah Arlen's done. But it just feels different. I think it's just taking some getting used to for him. And again, I think sometimes it's interrupting the tone of a certain scene when it has this then like flashback that we're meant to laugh at. But if I'm getting like a little bit of mersh at the scene and then you're trying to make me laugh, it's like I don't know how to feel. So then it just I don't think it lands well sometimes.
I think it would just be way more interesting, and they would accomplish the same thing if they portrayed Arlen as a huge asshole who's not very knightly, who talks about and keeps contradicting himself, with all these teachings, and then Dunk projects onto him that that's how to be a knight, when indeed when in reality he wasn't. And I think that it would have achieved the same thing if you portray Arlen as this very stern, very hard man, instead of making a joke out of it. See that
I do agree.
Yeah.
I do agree with pretty much all your guys' thoughts. And I'll say, for at least for context, for me, JC, and Becky, we haven't seen the whole season, so we don't know necessarily where they're going with the whole Arlen character, subject to change. But what they've shown us through 2 episodes so far is kind of my vibe. And kind of while we're on the subject of the comedy, this is something that I just kind of was thinking, and I'm still on the fence on how I feel about this, but I do feel like at times the comedy is making Dunk at the expense of him being like really stupid. I don't know if you guys get that vibe. I'm not even gonna say who wants to talk, but whoever wants to talk on the comedy in terms of, do you think it's making Dunk a little too stupid?
I don't think so. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you, Becky.
It is. No, I agree. I agree with you, JC. I don't think it's making him look stupid. I think it's just making him look nervous and not confident. Like I think it's making him look like he's doubting himself. He doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know how to talk to these highborn people. I think it's making him just look very, very nervous and like he's got no confidence, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with Becky. I don't think at all it makes Dunk look stupid. Like anybody when they're in the presence of, well, especially from the perspective of Dunk, he's in the presence of nobility. He's talking to Baylor Breakspear. Of course, he's going to stumble over his words and be like, it was 4 lances. Oh, okay. Well, Sir Arlen said 7. Oh, okay. And then even him walking out from that chamber and being lost on his way. I don't think it details any stupidity on his behalf. I think he's just as Becky mentioned, he's just nervous and he just survived an encounter with the Targaryens. He kind of just wants to get out of there and is a little bit nervous. So I think it's just more about nervousness than it is about any Dunk the Lunk thing here.
I do want a preference before you say anything, Ricky. I want to preference that when I mean this, I don't mean like situations where like he's talking to highborn people. I mean as simple as something as like, he's talking with Egg right after the meeting with Tanzel. And, they're talking and then Dunk's trying to say, oh, they called me stupid. And then he just, and we're left with like Egg just going, oh, okay, what do you mean by that? Like, is there something else you're trying to say? That's the kind of stuff I'm more kind of referring to in the first 2 episodes where it's like, this is just Dunk having a normal conversation and he seems oblivious to what's going on. That's kind of what I mean. I don't mean like, I'm not saying it as in terms of like, oh, he's in front of Baylor and he's in front of Makar and he's kind of making a fool of himself and all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, I agree with you guys totally. It's more like the stuff that's not focused on when he's, talking to high lords or he's just talking to regular people. And he just kind of seems like something's not working in his head sometimes. That's kind of more what I mean. So when I say something like that, and I don't totally like think that is the case. Like I don't think that maybe Dunk is too stupid, but it's in moments like this that's kind of at the expense of a comedy scene. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's just a comedy. But I'm with the other two. I think he's competent enough because we see him. I mean, he's in episode 1 and he's talking to Lionel like he's just some regular guy, and I get that they are drunk, but he's also competent enough to kind of lecture Egg, and so we don't really lose that aspect. So whenever he's comfortable, he's competent, and I would have problems if that were not the case. If he were not able to do anything. If everything
I
is just
totally
funny.
agree.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just one of those things I took away that I'm like, again, like I said, I'm not like fully like saying, oh, Dunk's stupid, but I mean like situationally sometimes there's moments where I'm like, this feels like, okay, we're just forcing comedy in for there to be comedy. And it's funny that I'm even referencing that moment because I actually found that moment to be funny too. So I was just, I don't know. It's just something that, I don't know, I was thinking about that I kind of wanted to bring up to you guys. So, yeah.
So what you're saying is that Dunk is stupid.
Yeah. I think he's a total moron that cannot function in society. And that's
I'm
why
gonna clip
No,
that. I'm gonna clip that and take it out of context and make a short out of it.
Go ahead. Well, I'll put the hate comments in there. But yeah. So let's move on then. So JC, you kind of, were alluding to this, especially in your opening comments. So I want to start with you.
Yeah.
How do you think casual audiences will respond to the first 2 episodes? Trying to say this while looking at the chat, and it's distracting. But in terms of, I did a live stream on this earlier this week, and and I did note that like the more casual audience that were making reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, that's what everybody's kind of throwing out there, is that there's like been a very big divide between critic reviews, which are overwhelmingly positive, 95%. Then you got the other side of things, which is a lot lower. It's like 69% for the popcorn meter, which is, for people that don't know, that's anybody with an account. You can go on, you can make a review. And so you referenced earlier that you thought maybe it could have been a movie or maybe there's too much fluff in this episode. So how do you think more casual audiences will respond to the first 2 episodes?
So it's interesting because the things that I personally found interesting, such as, Aaron Bright Flame arriving and, telling Dunk, like, get my horse, and, Duncan the Tall's interaction with Feely Pate. I thought that stuff was pretty great. But I don't even know if a casual fan will like this. A casual fan might just say, like, oh, Dunk's just just renting out some armor. Why is this important? Or, oh, look, Dunk is, just walking around these campgrounds. Like, where's the action? I think maybe the casual audiences, and again, I don't really know. Like, I don't interact with casual audiences very often, but I imagine like they might have been really interested in the jousting scene. But as far as everything else around the jousting scene, I don't really know. Something tells me that even 2 episodes in, they might have still thought that this episode was rather slow.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I'll give my dad's review at the end of this section, but I'll let everybody talk.
Yeah.
So, Ricky, what do you think like casual audience reception will be in terms of the first 2 episodes?
I think it's a slow start for people who are not familiar with the novella, but I see a lot of positive comments. I see people being really fond of the dancing scene, and I think a show like House of the Dragon would get a lot of flack for that, for having such a big, dancing scene that really takes its time. I think I remember. Okay, no, because that was completely overshadowed by Kristen Cole and Laenor, Joffrey. So yeah, I think it's fine. I'm with you guys though. In a perfect world, this would be a movie because the
Agreed.
pacing is weird. At times it's very fast, and at times it's very slow. And we're gonna get to the very fast things soon, and you're like, wait, I wanted to have more time with that, and then it's, well, here's the conversation between Lionel and character XYZ for 300 minutes. It's a bit odd at times.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off what you were saying, Ricky, I mean, just think about it like this. In House of the Dragon Season 2, think about the outlash people were having just over episode 5 and 6, where it was more of a slower pace. So, apply that to this, a dancing scene. It's different based on what the show is. House of the Dragon presents itself as very serious. It's a civil war. Like, we don't have a lot of time for let's have a dancing sequence, So I do think it just depends, what your show is, what's the tone, and that's kind of what the first episode was trying to do, especially with the shitting scene at the beginning. But yeah, so I'll turn now to Becky. What do you think in terms of how casuals view the show so far?
So I'm hoping that from episode 2, I'm hoping they'll have liked the introduction of the Targaryens, because I think that's a big thing. If they're used to watching Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, then so far in Night of the Seven Kingdoms, we have just really focused on Dunk and his kind of small folk experience, whereas now we're learning about the big baddies, the big powerful people. So I'm hoping that they'll have found that interesting, and the small jousting section at the end, hopefully. But I think the main purpose of this episode was kind of that character depth for Dunk. I'm thinking it was more to do with him, because he's grieving over Sir Arlen of Pennytree. He's got low confidence. He's trying to work out how to be a knight when he doesn't even have enough money for armor. And, he has to create his own sigil. We're learning with Dunk how to try and be a knight. So I'm hoping that, because I got a really wholesome feel from the episode. I felt quite warm and fuzzy inside with a lot of those scenes for Dunk, and between Dunk and Egg, because Egg had more significance in this episode too. So their relationship is building. So I'm hoping that casual audiences will have enjoyed that character depth of connecting more to Dunk and learning more about him, connecting more to Egg, and seeing that relationship thrive, and then seeing the Targaryens involved in there as well. I'm hoping that will be enough for them to have really enjoyed the episode, even though there wasn't a whole lot of action in terms of the plot, because we know that's going to come up. We know the action is going to come, but I'm hoping that kind of wholesome feeling will hit with the casual audiences.
Agreed. And we know that from some of the reports coming out, that the first episode was viewed by a lot of people. In terms of HBO shows, it was 3rd for most viewed premiere, I believe, or something along those lines. It was top 3. And so we know a lot of people watched the first episode. I think the key number to look at is your retention. So did people that watched that first episode, did they watch it all the way through? Did they keep going to episode 2? And so I think that's really going to be important to look through as the episodes go by. I'll say this. So as some of you know, I watch with my dad every episode, and he's a casual. So I basically tried to gauge what were his thoughts, not knowing these characters, not having any background with these characters, liking them beforehand. Basically, this is the review. The review I got was liked it better than episode 1. It was a little bit more entertaining, but the problem that he still had was it's still very slow. There's no real payoff to anything that's happening as of right now through 2 episodes. We're still seeing, Dunk's getting his armor. They go to a joust, and then it just kind of cuts off fairly quickly when it feels like there should have been more here. And so I think that's what a lot of casuals might feel like with this show is we're 2 episodes in and only a 6-episode show, and not a whole lot's happened. There hasn't been a whole lot to raise the stakes if you're not personally invested with some of the characters. invested in Dunk, well, you know, you might not care if he becomes a knight or whatever. You know, there's not that heightened tension. So I'll be honest, a little uncomfortable watching that part. So I don't know what his reaction was. That I know he laughed more in this episode than he did the last episode. So I'll say that. And then the other main criticism that I saw from both chat, I don't know if it was before we went live or as we started, and then what I heard from him was, why such a short episode? You know, only 30 minutes. You know, kind of felt like we started getting into some stuff that would be enjoyable, like the jousting, and we're getting more into Dunk's character, and then it kind of just ends. So I think that's generally what I could see from this. And I also want to respond to Barron's. He did like the jousting stuff. It's just that it felt very quick. It felt like, okay, we've been building now for 2 episodes, and then we see them start up, and then it just kind of, you know, jump cuts and we're back with Dunk at the camp. It's not very long. You know, there's not a lot there. So that's generally what I feel casuals may think about it until we get to some of the bigger episodes, which are definitely coming based on the novella. So yeah, anything else you guys want to talk about on the casual side of things, or how the public is going to receive Night of the Seven Kingdoms?
Can I just say 2 things on this real quick?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I try not to like talk too much. So one thing, Ricky, you had mentioned last week about how you don't need, you know, these like episode enders like Bran being pushed out the window by Jaime Lannister, or, you know, with House of the Dragon, the first episode, King Viserys crowning, or not crowning, but legitimizing Rhaenyra as his true heir, as opposed to Daemon Targaryen. However, although I don't think if an episode is enjoyable enough, I don't think you need those episode enders. I think with something, you know, that maybe a little this slow, I think it is something that maybe the casual audiences will need to hook them in to watch the next episode, because as is, this episode just kind of abruptly ended. You know, it's just, you know, Dunk and Egg having a nice conversation once again underneath the stars, and, you know, Dunk is, I forget what he says, something along the lines of like, oh, I'll show them, or like, I'll show them all, or something like that. And then the episode ends just abruptly. It's like, oh, okay, that's an interesting place to end it. I don't really know if it necessarily hooked viewers to come back and watch episode 3, which brings me to my second point. I do think that this show very much would have been, and Eric, I know you're not a fan of the binge model, but I think with a show like this, I think it would have benefited from a binge model, or maybe not an entire binge, but maybe like the first 3 episodes being, you know, streamed within the same night, and then waiting week to week for the rest of the show. Because as is, it's just kind of like, okay, you know, I liked what I watched, but I don't know if this is interesting enough to wait week to week to watch. But
That's going to change for the better, though. The other 4 endings are bangers. Those are the type of moments that we talked about, like Bran being pushed out of the window type.
okay.
You know, endings. They, but I think I still would have preferred this as a movie, and that was a question by Meadow Mass. I think what it does, if you release it weekly, is that, you know, it drags certain events out, and then it doesn't really have that structure that a movie could have, where, you know, a certain reveal takes you into the middle act, and then you have this huge tourney, the huge fight, and sorry, there's some sound issues going on, I think. Way better. Sorry, I couldn't concentrate. And then the last bit is obviously, you know, taking you to the big moments that we're here for. Whereas now we're waiting for that for 4 weeks, for 5 weeks. And I actually, like, we keep referencing this, and I think we should stop, but I got to watch all 6, and I watched them all in one sitting, and it worked. And I think I would have enjoyed it less if I got to see it weekly, because, as you mentioned, especially at first, there's no real, not many hooks, you know, they're not doing the thing that we're criticizing House of the Dragon for, which is, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Those type of things. But yeah, Monologue's over.
Is my audio being kind of weird right now?
Yeah, you're playing music or something.
You're
on
music.
your end. I'm not
What
sure.
I am so okay. One of you guys take over and talk about some stuff. I'm trying. I don't understand what audio is playing, but I will try my best to figure that out.
Ricky, what you mentioned, that's so true. Like I had neglected. I don't know why I thought that you were. Of course, you're not watching it week 2. You were given all 6 episodes in one go, so of course you had the advantage of just being able to stream the whole thing. And if maybe an episode, maybe you didn't. Well, it seems like you enjoyed all 6 episodes, but maybe one episode you didn't enjoy as much. It's like, okay, it's not a big deal. I can just watch the next episode and have a better time with it. That is true. You had that advantage that a lot of people currently who did not get those screeners don't have that advantage. So for them, they might be asking themselves, especially if they didn't read the book, they might be asking, okay, why should I come back to this show for an episode 3? Like, what about this interests me? So talk to us, Becky. All right. Yes, Becky, I'm sorry. Go for it.
Oh, here we go again. No, I think that, to be fair, I think here we go. Up front and frontal. I think the end of the episode is important because that's the part that kind of keeps people wanting to come back. And I felt like the end of episode 1 was quite good because it was kind of like not philosophical, but it was like it had importance. They would kind of look up at the stars, and there was a deep, meaningful chat, and I felt like that was like enough. But I think with this episode ending, it was a little bit odd because I do feel like it was kind of like in the middle of a conversation. And I felt like they could have just added a scene of something else that can kind of like provoke a bit more intrigue. It was just a bit of an odd ending, but I still enjoyed it. And I would obviously still come back, but it's whether or not the more casual viewers would.
Agreed. Also, I did want to answer a question from Matthew. We have gotten all of the links told to us already. They're all going to be very much more similar to today's episode than episode 1. They're all going to be more around 30 to 35 minutes. So that's what you should expect going forward. I also will go back to the conversation, JC brought up, on one hand, like I agree with Ricky, but on the other hand, I also agree with JC on the idea of like, you have to think of it from somebody that doesn't care about this world, that is maybe just seeing an ad for this and they're like, oh, this is cool, some medieval thing, maybe it's attached to Game of Thrones, so that's what draws them in. And when you come from the idea that it's like House of the Dragon, if you go through the episodes, you think about the endings, there's always something there that's like, oh, I want to see where this goes, or what happens here for the most part. And Game of Thrones is similar. Somebody also was talking about, well, Game of Thrones taught us we should do slower, not rush things, and I agree with that. But you also got to remember, even in the early seasons of Game of Thrones, what D&D were working with is you have 5 to 10 chapters where you can go, which one has the best ending and which one would make sense to end the episode. And you go, oh, Bran falling, or Robert dying, and then Ned's coup, and all that. Like you have a lot of stuff to pull from to end episodes, which is what makes those a lot better as TV shows. Whereas the novellas are a lot more like, they're much more narratively, they have a point where they start to pick up. And for a show like this, when you have 2 episodes back to back that don't really have an ending that's like, oh, I want to see what happens next. They're much more, wholesome, or as some of you have said, is like kind of feel random. It's not great for trying to pull in a viewer to go, oh, let me watch the next episode. So I do agree on, I think, JC, what you brought up, I think that the first 2 episodes should have been released together. Because then when you wait the next week, you're into episode 3, and that should be a bigger episode. It should ramp up the tension, ramp up your interest in the show. So that's my general thoughts on that. But I do want to move on a little bit.
Yeah.
Going from some more of maybe the negative, I do want to ask all of you. I'll start with Becky. What was your favorite scene or moment from the episode?
My favorite scene?
Yes.
Ooh. It's too predictable to say Sarah Allen of Penis Tree, because obviously that's got to be it. but no, I actually think it was probably the awkwardness that Dunk had around Tanzel. I think because I just thought it was so like sweet and innocent that he just doesn't know how to speak to her. But then I also feel like that's where we see Egg being funny, and like Egg being a wingman. Like coaching him along as to how to talk to girls. I just feel like that kind of light-hearted stuff, it really lands with me. So I actually probably think that, or the other one that's just popped in my mind is on a complete contrast, him selling his horse, because that was emotional. I
It was a good scene.
could have cried. I mean, it is early for me, so it's fine. But like, I could have cried at that scene. That was so sad.
Agreed. We know how much you love your animals, Becky. So
Yeah,
that's definitely it was a good scene. It was a good scene. Ricky, what was your favorite scene or moment from the episode?
It's probably the scene we have with the Targaryens, and especially Baelor. I think Baelor, he just oozes chivalry and just a great casting. So that's the obvious one. One we didn't talk about yet is the encounter of Dunk with the Kingsguard and the new armor. I also thought that was great because the awkwardness that we've talked about as well with Dunk really shined in that moment because he was confronted by his ideal, and given that we know where he's headed in the story. I think that was a very sweet moment, very very cool. Where you're like, hey, okay, was about to spoil something. Sorry.
Where he was like, "Hey."
HBO's watching you, Ricky. Ira Parker's on this stream.
Yeah.
Come on, Ricky, say something. You shouldn't.
Oh, I get
Say
the
something you
stage now.
shouldn't.
Well, hello. I am the Night King.
That's all you need to say. All right, moving on. Anything else you want to say, Ricky, before we move to JC?
No, I'm good.
No, okay. All right, JC, favorite scene or moment?
Oh, hey, thanks for the spotlight. As Baron put it here, I did like the Goodman Pate scene. I think that was probably my favorite, the interaction between Duncan Attal and Saul Goodman Pate. I thought that was really good. Just everything leading up to that and everything around that scene of Dunk having to, deal with the fact that like, oh man, I've only got 2 stags. Well, and then Steely Pate, played so perfectly by his actor being like, okay, well, I'm still a hard ass, but yeah, you can rent the equipment. I have a hard ass, but a hard ass with a heart of gold. Here, you can rent the equipment for a day, and that's fine. I thought that was just a really great interaction, and I thought it was really sweet. One thing I'm actually seeing a lot of people here on the chat say is that they all enjoyed the Egg the Wingman scene.
It was very wholesome.
Yeah. Sorry for stealing your thunder, Grease, because I know you were about to mention your favorite scene.
Oh, you're good.
What did everyone think about Egg being a wingman to Dunk, kind of fumbling his words with Tanzel Tutal?
Loved it.
I loved it.
I know Ira Parker said he wanted to make like Egg more intelligent. I think that's what he said, and I liked it. I very much enjoyed all the extra stuff we got with Egg in this episode. Fantastic for me.
Yeah. No, I loved it too. I just wanted to. It's like, yeah, it's great. It's great. And chat, it was pretty great chat. I thought it was great. Eric, you thought it was great.
Yeah. Becky thought it was great. It was her favorite.
Thought it was great. She did.
I'll say my favorite. I feel like it's pretty basic. I was trying to be like, oh, what was something nobody would say, but I do think the Targaryen scene with Dunk was probably my favorite. Albeit, there's some people in this call that have got a sense of humor and they think they're funny. But I did like Baelor's introduction. I honestly, just when the Targaryens arrived, when Dunk talks with them, I enjoyed that entire sequence. The Kingsguard sequence, Baelor, Aryan, act like Makar's not there. Wasn't a fan of him, but I liked that whole section. I enjoyed pretty much everything that came with that. So yeah, there's some funny guys in this chat. Okay, they think they're real funny. They think they're real funny. This guy right here, he thinks he's real funny.
This is just too
this
much
guy
power.
As well.
This is just too much power. I'm sorry. I can.
Becky's an angel and would never do any nonsense like that.
Sure.
Becky the righteous.
So that's all I'll say on that one. Now that we've talked about our favorite scenes or moments, Ricky, what was your least favorite scene or moment from episode 2?
No, I gotta be everything that has to do with Arlen. As I said, I really don't like Arlen in the show, and that pretty much goes for every scene. It's just not my humor. I know what they are going for. and I hate to be the guy that's like, you guys are having way too much fun, but I think they are having way too much fun with that.
That's all you want to, just because you don't like how Arlen's characterized. That's why it's your least favorite, or is there something more? In
Yeah, yeah, it's just the depiction. I just totally disagree on how they portray the guy. I don't think it's funny. It drags and it doesn't serve. It serves the purpose, it does portray the contrast, but it's so on the nose, and most of the times just rolling my eyes and like, okay, let's just move on.
Ricky, you didn't fall for the bait. I was trying to bait you into you didn't like see in Arlen's dick.
Well,
Oh.
I mean, what I wanted to say was that obviously they've made huge changes, gigantic
massive.
changes that absolutely massive for the plot. And
And on that massive statement made by Ricky,
sorry. Can I just
go ahead.
Can I just answer Matthew's question right
Yes.
here? Do you feel it's subversive just to be subversive? Yes, it is telling you that it's different so much, so often, that it's just edgy. It's just like, oh, we're so different, and I like that they are different, but some things are good for a reason. There's a difference between stereotypes and archetypes. Archetypes, things that we've been introduced to in this universe that worked because they always do, and that's what I'm here for. And sometimes it can definitely, take away from the overall quality of the show, because it keeps telling you, hey, we're not doing that, or hey, we're actually very funny, and it's like, come on. The lightheartedness with Egg and stuff, that is enough to make it tonally different to everything we've seen so far, I think. So yeah, I'm struggling with the comedy.
Agreed. I totally get you on that, Ricky. But moving on then to Becky, what was your least favorite moment or scene, or maybe something you just didn't like in the episode? What was that for you?
Yeah, I think it is some of the comedy that isn't really landing. And actually, there was a question that someone just put up about the gross moments at the start of every episode, and are we going to have to see that at the start of every episode? Is that something that you can confirm or deny, Ricky? Is there gross stuff at the start of every episode?
No, but there's always weird stuff.
Weird
Like
stuff.
there's an actual jazz
Weird.
sequence at the start of one of the episodes. Like there's a saxophone playing and stuff. That it's a very weird start. So it's always
There's some dubstep as
weird.
well in the show. Is that what you're telling
No,
me?
just jazz. Just jazz.
Okay. Oh, you know what? Now that we bring that up, I will say that I liked the music in this episode. Like, I wasn't as bought in maybe in the first episode. The episode 2, I was like,
You finally come around.
Yeah, I liked it a lot more. I'll say that.
Yeah, the music's good.
JC, moving in. Any massive statements you want to say on what was your least favorite moment or scene from episode 2?
Well, last week's episode had a 69% approval rating on the popcorn meter on Rotten Tomatoes, so I'd be
Nice.
I'd be curious to see if that exact numerical percentage stays for this episode too, because that would be very appropriate based on the intro for this episode. But yeah, it's just a lot of the humor. I know it's all subjective, but it's in violent and how much weirder can it get? Oh, I don't know, Ricky.
No, that's the extent of it.
For now.
Yeah, I think Ricky hit the nail on the head. Like, subversion just for subversion's sake, it's just not, sometimes it's not. If it's not necessary, then don't do it. Otherwise, it's just like, oh, haha, look at us subverting your expectations. Once again, look at this funny Arlen stuff. Also, Arlen was kind of a jerk, and this, comedic thing kind of tonally conflicts with what we're trying to say. But aha, look at it, subverting expectations. Woo! And it's just, let's freaking go. Let's go. But yeah, I just, what am I?
But you have a question, so I put it on the screen.
maybe in the summer, the summaries take a lot out of me. They kill me. But if you really want it, I could be bribed into doing so if you like, comment, and subscribe on all my videos. and
donate and become a member and follow JC on all social medias.
Great
Yeah.
marketing. I need you in the marketing team for the short film that I'm
Eric?
releasing this week. Ah, see?
That was good. That was good. Becky, anything you want to plug while we're at it?
What for JC?
No, for yourself,
just
not
in
for
general.
JC. He got his time.
Oh, I thought we were hyping up JC. Yeah, people can subscribe if they want. I'm not fussed. It's their choice, isn't it? They got free will. I'd love it if they did, but they don't have to.
Becky, we got to work on your plugging. You subscribe right now. You like, or Cersei comes for you and you die. Okay, like the intro says on
wow.
the videos, and you become a member and all that. There you go. That was your hour plug right there on the hour.
Oh, thanks.
And yeah, moving back to A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, that funny show. I'll say for my least favorite, I'm going to get a little weird since we're getting weird. Since everybody said, the kind of the flashback stuff with Arlen, didn't like that, but I'm also going to go back to my favorite scene. And the same stuff with like my favorite stuff being the Baelor, the Aryan stuff. My least favorite was almost any time that Maekar spoke. I was just like rolling my eyes. I'm like, why? Why did we make him like this? Why? I don't know. I might be, when I do my rewatch, I might soften on it. But right now, I'm just not a fan. I'm not a fan.
I'm not liking him.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of him either at the moment.
I'd be very curious because obviously, we've read the book, so we get, some Stannis vibes from Maekar when we read the book. But I'd be curious to see what casual fans think of him not having that comparison point of the book and not having that context, what they just think of him in general.
Oh, JC, let's be frank here. It is totally a bias of why I don't like the Maekar stuff, because I feel he should be a lot more like Stannis, and Stannis is my favorite character. So I want to see more of that, and it's just not that. So I don't know. What do you guys think, Becky, Ricky? What do you guys think about how people will view Maekar that haven't read the book?
He just seems unnecessarily rude. Dunk would just say normal things, and then he would just snap back with like a rude comment. I feel like sometimes it's just unnecessarily like bitter. He comes across as.
Yeah,
I would agree.
Yeah, I'm totally. I totally agree. I think they'll probably just to add on that. I think they'll just see him as another funny guy in the funny show, because that's the thing. Every character gets to be funny in the show. Even Arion has a funny scene. Hey,
but I can see it. Arian's kind of he's got some things going on, but I could see him, laying some jokes out there. That's just who he is. But yeah.
To answer Matthew real quick, just
go ahead.
really, really quick. Yes, there will be English subtitles.
Sounds good. I feel like we kind of touched on some of this stuff in terms of the added scenes or moments, but I do think this is kind of like a good closing conversation. So now that we are a third of the way through the show, which kind of feels weird to even say, for at least for three of us here, what do you think that the show can continue to do to either get better? Like so far, right now we're kind of hovering around. It's definitely good, but it's not perfect. What do you guys think it can do to improve? I'll go to
bigger and bigger cocks.
Of course, Ricky. I'll go to JC. What do you think the show can do better, or what have you liked in the first two episodes that you think that they can improve upon?
Honestly, it's just the stuff that happens in the book. That's the stuff that I really enjoy, and not because I'm a book snob, but just because it's been, the adaptation choices. I don't agree with all of them, but some of what we've seen on screen, I was like, oh, that's really cool. They brought this to life. Tanzel Tutal's puppets, Steely Pate, Goodman Steely Pate, some of the jousting we've seen, even the tug of war scene that chat was just kind of, glowing about here. I thought that was really cute. Just seeing kind of more of that happen in the next couple episodes, I'm excited to see. And, I do think that, and Ricky, I don't know if you can confirm this, but I do think we're on the precipice of the big moments coming up here in episode 3. And that's where the meat of the story really gets going. And I'm looking forward to seeing that play out.
Yeah, it gets bigger now.
Yeah.
Ricky, if you want to piggyback off that, I don't know how to ask you this question because you've already seen the whole show. So
the thing is,
I can rephrase it for you, Ricky.
Spoil everything except
for
the
that.
things that we book readers already know. But I'm not allowed to talk about the obvious things, and
I get
people
that, I get
read
that,
it.
but I also don't want you to spoil it for me, Ricky. So
Oh, okay. Oh,
okay,
sorry,
let me rephrase this.
well, in episode 3, at the very start, 3 minutes
Okay.
and
Ricky, what do you think, just in terms of the first 2 episodes, that they've done well and not so well?
Not so well. I'm going to come back to. I have to come back to Arlen. I really don't like the depiction so that's for the things that I didn't do good. I really like Dunk. I really like Egg. I think that's really, really good. So in terms of characters, those are the ones that, are either positive or negative.
Agreed. Becky, I'll ask you then. So what do you think the show can do to improve, or, maybe for you to like it more than you do right now?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a balance of the action, so like the plot progression, because so far we've been having very, very small plot movements, but not a whole lot. But I think that has to change in episode 3 based on what's coming up. Like there has to be some juicy stuff happening in that episode, just based on the timings and where we're currently at in terms of the novella. So I think the action for sure, and getting into the nitty-gritty of the plot and the higher stakes for Dunk. But then I also think the wholesomeness between Dunk and Egg in that relationship.
Agreed. I think those are the strong points so far. The first 2 episodes is when we actually do have those character moments, and something I know it's not going to be changed, so I don't know why I'm saying it, but I do hope that in the future they don't use comedy in a way that takes away from whatever's happening on screen. If there's a time and place for comedy, and I know Ricky, I know I'm acting like you don't exist, and you haven't told me that what's gonna not in the plot wise, but I mean what to expect. I do think the thing that holds it back outside of the pacing, outside of, okay, 2 episodes in and we're kind of trudging along here, is at times the comedy just seems to be either random, or it feels like it kind of is just having a tonal conflict at times. Oh boy, that you guys are clever. I'll give you that. Chat, I'll give you guys are clever tonight, and especially given how late it is, especially for if you're not in the United States, that's clever. But I think that's a good segue then into what are your guys' final thoughts on the episode, and give it a rating. Becky, we'll start with you. What are your closing thoughts on the episode? Anything else you would like to say about it, and what is your rating for it out of 10?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed this episode. It had a lot of strong points. A lot of the humour landed with me, mainly in Dunk's awkwardness and his conversations with Egg, but also the introduction to the Targaryens. So I did enjoy this more than last week. So I feel like I gave last week an 8. So I think I'm going to give this one an 8.5 out of 10.
It's a good rating. It's a good rating. You matched with Matthew in chat on an 8.5. Ricky, what would you give the episode rating wise? Any final closing thoughts on the episode?
I liked it. I think the intimate, slower paced scenes were beautiful. As I've mentioned countless times in the stream, I really love Baelor. And I also liked it more than last week's episode. So I'm gonna give this one an 8.
That's a good rating. Good rating. JC, moving on. Same question to you on your final thoughts and rating for episode 2.
Yeah, I definitely like the introduction of the Targaryens. I like that we're getting a little bit more into the meat of the story. I'm not a fan of how stretched out some of these scenes are. Not that I have a problem with it, but I just think that, a scene that is 3 minutes could be, a minute. Things that are stretched out, which I know is meant to be stretched out to encompass 6 episodes, but I liked it. I'm actually going to regrade episode 1. Originally, I gave it an 8. I'm going to give that one a 7.5 out of 10, and I'm going to give this episode an 8 out of 10.
Okay, so JC rewriting history. We're now on the same page. I'm
like the Maesters.
Yeah, you're a Maester. Everybody was like, "Oh, JC was so positive about the first episode." And you come back to this stream like 7.5. What happened? But yeah. So me and you have the exact same ratings. I gave this episode an 8 as well. I thought it was an improvement over episode 1. Thought it was a bit more entertaining. I enjoyed a lot more of the dynamics, the smaller moments, like Becky brought up, earlier with Dunk having to sell his horse. Like I thought those moments worked pretty well. I think it's just, this is kind of what we expected for anybody that's kind of read the novella. You knew the first 2 episodes were going to be slower. It's kind of what you expected. But yeah, this is a wild statement to say. You guys are
criticized it loads.
Hold on. I'm gonna go grease the pole. I'm gonna go grease the pole for a second. You guys are
so many
afraid
negatives.
to criticize the show. My brother in Christ. Okay, most people do not criticize the show at all. Okay, most people are like, I love this show. It's so great. Everything's fantastic.
Bunch of fakers.
We gave the last episode. Ricky gave it a 7 out of 10. If you guys didn't go to school in the U.S. anyway, that's a C. That's not great. That's
it's
That's not bad either.
It's decent.
It's all right.
That's good enough. Like, what are you talking about? We had whole segments of this live stream that were criticizing the show. Are you like, where have you been tuned in at? Sorry, I had a little crash out.
No worries, no worries.
Attacked, but I mean,
They didn't watch the whole live stream, clearly.
they watched us at the very end where we were like, yeah, we like the show.
What was?
I mean, okay, well, hold on for a second. We're gonna go back to this. So Becky gave it an 8.5 out of 10, which means, and she was the highest of all 4 of us. Becky still did not give it a 10 out of 10, which means she had problems with the episode.
Exactly. And I gave the book a 10 out of 10. I gave it an 11 out of 10.
Wow.
I had problems with the show.
Wow.
Sorry, I got a little House of the Dragon season 2 pilled there for a second. That's how that was like a glimpse of what the whole streams were, Becky.
I'm looking forward to season 3 of House of the Dragon for this
gonna be
exact reason that I'm just gonna be here and
I'm ready to laugh.
Given that, if you see how George crashes out, I'm very interested to see what he meant. What really drove those 2 apart.
We will see.
Another dragon bursting through the floor.
I will say this: if you are very critical of this episode, you didn't like it, tell us why. Don't just say, "Oh, the show's bad." Just tell us why. Like, I mean, we just did an hour and 11 minutes talking about our in-depth thoughts of the episodes. So, if you didn't like it, tell us why. I'd love to see why. I mean, this is also going to help for maybe how, I don't know if you're a casual or you're not a casual, but it would kind of help with like, oh, what are criticisms of the show? I don't know. But yeah.
What was Eric's dad's score? So Eric, your dad
actually 8 out of 10. So his was
8.
an improvement as well. It went from a 7 to an 8.
We should.
I did have to tell him though, to hold on. Episodes 3 is when the ball starts getting rolling. So
Gotcha.
I don't know, but an 8 out of 10 is pretty good. So
yeah,
I don't know. All right. Any closing thoughts you guys want to say before we get out of here and all that?
No, I'm ready for sleep.
Hell yeah.
Same at 6 a.m.
Can we always send a thank you for staying up late and or early for you guys now for Ricky and Becky as they stay up ungodly hours to watch this show and review it for you guys.
This is why I wanted the show to be good, because if it was rubbish, it's not worth setting a 2:30 alarm for it.
Imagine how Ricky felt House of the Dragon season 2.
That was crazy.
We got the most unhinged version. Becky, I genuinely think if this show had been like bad as Ricky views season 2, I genuinely think Ricky would have there would have been sections of this stream where he would have just been cursing the entire time.
Yeah. The story is very near and dear to me. I'm glad that it's not a bastardization of the source material.
Speaking of bastards,
oh,
we got the confirmation
smooth.
of the red grass. We did get confirmation the Blackfires, they do exist.
They do, yes.
Universe,
we got a Blackfire line. That's true.
We did. I was very excited. Hopefully we get more. Hopefully we get merch made on the Blackfires so I can have some.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we should end it there so you guys can get some sleep. Thank you for everybody joining in, chatting, all that kind of stuff. And we will see you guys in the next live stream or video. Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye, guys.
See you around.